Welcome to Tigrai Television. I'm Erin Yaman. I'll be reading the news for you today. Stay tuned. The president of Tigray, President Debretsion Mikhail, in a Facebook post on Tuesday, congratulated the people of Tigray on the first anniversary of the liberation of Ma'ala from enemy forces. The president said the day marks a serious turn in the conflict that indicated it was impossible to subjugate the people of Tigray. The president said the people of Tigray, despite being subjected to unspeakable violence, including sexual abuse, mass execution, and torture, had secured its right to self-determination and showed to the world that it will not bend to the will of any group that hopes to govern by force. The president said that while enemy forces had been removed from greater portion of Tigray, many parts of the state remain under occupation, as the Ethiopian government continues to withhold essential services and block much-needed aid, further testing the resilience of the people, but said that the government of people of Tigray will work hand in hand to find a lasting solution to the crisis and will not be yielded to the whims of these forces. Several reports have come out of national as well as international outlets indicating the Sudanese forces used heavy artillery to shell an area in western Gondar and Amhara region last week. The reports came after rising tensions between the Ethiopian and Sudanese government after Ethiopian forces killed 7 soldiers and 1 civilian in their custody and paraded their bodies in public. The situation has started to become even more tense, with the Sudanese government calling its envoys back from Addis Ababa and requesting a formal response from the Ethiopian diplomatic delegation in Khartoum. In response to these claims, Ethiopia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a buzzer statement on Monday in which it claimed the Sudanese army was supported by the ruling party in Tigray, the Tigray People's Liberation Front. Reporter Sarun Tsagai has more.
According to multiple reports from international as well as national outlets, Sudanese military have shelled an area in Ethiopia's western Gondar on Monday following the escalation of tensions among the two countries after Ethiopian forces killed 7 Sudanese soldiers and a civilian last week and displayed their bodies to the public. The shelling, according to local residents and officials, lasted for nearly 5 hours, while there is yet to be any official figures on casualties. A statement by the Sudanese military regarding the killing of the captive soldiers and civilian murdered by Ethiopian forces read that the Ethiopian government should expect a fierce response from its forces, saying that treacherous acts will not pass without a response. Sudanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs called back its envoy in Addis Ababa and requested an explanation from the Ethiopian ambassador in Khartoum regarding the incident. The Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ethiopia's Defense Ministry issued conflicting statements in regarding to the killing of Sudanese citizens. In a bizarre statement, Foreign Affairs Ministry accused Sudanese regular forces of being backed by the Tigray People's Liberation Front. But a statement from Ethiopia's Ministry of Defense, on the other hand, denied that the act was committed by members of the Ethiopia's National Defense Forces. The ministry said that the Sudanese army clashed with local militia from the Amhara region and that not a single member of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces was present in the area. Several media outlets are also reporting that the chief of the Sudanese military and leader of the nation, General Abdul Fattah al-Burhan, has arrived in the contested area of Al-Fashqa along with other military officials. Tensions between Sudan and Ethiopia have run high in recent years because of a spillover of the war waged on Tigray and the construction of the Renaissance hydropower dam. Tens of thousands of Tigrayan refugees have fled into Sudan, and there has been military strife in Al-Fashqa, an area of disputed farmland along the border.
In related news, the Office of External Affairs issued a statement earlier today in which it called allegations by Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs that TPLF is supporting the Sudanese false and misguided attempt at trying to divert attention from the domestic crisis. The office said that this statement and others like it that attempt to draw Tigrayans as behind all disorder in the country are a strong indication of the fact that the Ethiopian government is not sincerely interested in a peaceful resolution to the conflict. Sarun Tsagai reports.
Tigray External Affairs Office issued a statement regarding claims by Ethiopia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs accusing Tigray's ruling party, the Tigray People's Liberation Front (TPLF), of supporting the Sudanese army, calling the accusation false and saying the Ethiopian government has continued to use Tigray as a punching bag to divert attention away from its lack of legitimacy. The office said the ministry's claims are proved in the same statement, where after making categorical claim that the border skirmish was precipitated by incursions by the Sudanese army supported by the TPLF, then also promises to investigate the matter, implying uncertainty as to the cause of the incident. The office also said that Abiy's regime has failed in governance and is continuing to see Tigray as a punching bag, critical and diverting attention away from its embarrassing domestic record, and reviving its moribund legitimacy, and called the recent allegation an extension of the regime's hallucinatory tendency to see Tigrayans lurking in every corner, sowing conflict and discord. The office also made reference to a statement by Ethiopia's Joint Security and Intelligence Task Force that blamed Tigrayans for masterminding horrific massacres against civilians in Gambela and elsewhere, while there is a mounting evidence indicating that government security forces are the main perpetrators of violence against civilians in Ethiopia. Finally, the statement said the government of Tigray believes that the barrage of coordinated false claims against Tigray by Abiy Ahmed's regime is strongly suggestive of the Ethiopian government's insincere commitment to a peaceful settlement to the conflict.
Today marks exactly a year since the start of the siege on Tigray, where, after Ethiopian forces were forced to retreat from Tigray's capital, they blocked all basic services, including telecommunication, banking, and electricity, not to mention its commercial goods, humanitarian assistance, and medical supplies. We visited Ida Referral Hospital to see how a year-long siege has affected the largest hospital in the region. We spoke to the medical director, Dr. Kibrom ገብረስላሴ, that told us the hospital is now at a near stand still. Solomit Khalai has more.
For exactly a year now, the Ethiopian government has imposed a siege on Tigray, with all essentially needed items, such as food aid and life-saving medical supplies, prevented from reaching the many in need. Adar Comprehensive Specialized Hospital, the largest referral hospital in Tigray, has been among the most affected by the ongoing blockade. Services in the hospital have deteriorated to a degree where the hospital is unable to provide care for many of its patients. We visited the hospital and spoke with the chief clinical director of the hospital, Dr. Kibrom ገብረስላሴ, on how services have deteriorated in the hospital over the past year when the Ethiopian government siege has been underway.
Due to the war and following the war, due to the siege, we are unable to deliver most of the functions. Almost we have suspended education. We are not giving training to undergraduate students other than interns and CT students, as well as some of the residency programs. When it comes to the hospital service, we have significant problem in diagnostics. Our radiology department is affected, which means MRI, CT, and X-ray, as well as ultrasound. Most of them, they need spare parts, they need staff, educated staff, so they are not functional now. And when it comes to the laboratory, we don't have calibrated instruments, equipment, they need calibration. We don't have reagents. Because of this, we are not providing enough diagnostic tests in our laboratory too. So with this, it is a limited service that we are giving.
The hospital, according to Dr. Kibrom, has not been able to provide even the most basic treatment with medical supplies in short supply across the region. The doctor emphasized that the hospital doesn't even have the most basic supplies, such as antibiotics and anesthesia drugs.
In our hospital, the surgeries, they are not very short, or 30 minutes or 1 hour surgeries. Some of them, they might even take the whole day. So for this, you need a large stock of anesthesia drugs. So because of this interruption of anesthesia drugs, we were forced to stop delivering elective surgeries. We were only focusing on emergency surgeries like trauma or cesarean section and so on. So it has created its own significant impact in our hospital. Of antibiotics that we need, they are secondary antibiotics, or we have the first line antibiotics that we get them in primary hospitals, in health centers. If this fails, the patient has to come to this hospital and get a higher degree antibiotics, so we are not able to get these medications, and we are not delivering this type of antibiotics. So the patients, they are, even if admitted to our hospital, or even if they are in the ICU, they are not getting the antibiotics they should get according to their disease profile.
Discussing the state of other hospital employees, Dr. Kubram stressed that despite not having a salary for over a year, the staff at either hospital have been devoted to their patients, doing whatever little was possible to keep patients alive and in good health.
Yeah, it is a kind of patriotism that we are seeing here. You don't expect anyone or any employee to go to their work if they are not paid. It's a contractual agreement, so that the organization will pay their salary at the end of the month, so that they have to work for a month. But if you stop 1 month, they might, give you time, but 2 months, 3 months, now it is 1 year. Despite of the suspension in salary, despite the lack of access to their bank accounts, our employees, they are still coming to the hospital. This is because, it is part of patriotism. It is the ethics that medicine requires. When they come to the hospital, they know they are going to save one life. If they don't come to the hospital, they might sit in their house, someone will die, a laboring mother might die, a child might die, or anyone that can be saved because of their availability in the hospital will die. So this is a force that is pushing them to come to the hospital. So for this, we are very grateful, and we can't thank them enough,
But, the chief clinical director explained, despite their devotion, many health professionals have found their personal and professional lives highly affected by the siege, with many feeling helpless due to their incapacity to care for their patients.
Sometimes, it might make you helpless. You have a patient in front of you, you know how to treat the patient, you have all the skills, you have the capability, you have the education, but you cannot treat the patient because you don't have the supplies, because there is no antibiotic, because there is no glove, because there is no anesthesia drug. So the patient is going to die in front of you. If this doesn't leave us helpless and hopeless, nothing could have left us helpless.
Dr. Kabam warned that the international community is failing in its responsibility to avert genocide in Tigray and take action sooner than later to save the lives of many.
This an act of genocide is being done under the watch of the international community. It's not invisible, it's not unheard. We are making our voice to be listened or to be heard everywhere. We are communicating with anyone who could listen to us. We are writing, we are sending messages and so on, hoping that help will come. But 1 year too long, and we don't know when it will end. So unless the international community acts, at least for humanitarian access, at least for medications, at least for life-sustaining materials and so on, when are they going to act? How many people should die so that they will act, or to call it genocide and so on? So instead of calling it retrospectively, it was a genocide, declaring it is a genocide and acting against a genocide will be, that's what I call to the international community.
For a year now, Tigray has practically been severed from the world, with its citizens unable to access even the vital services, including healthcare, banking, or food assistance. But the world has remained silent, failing to live up to its promise to never again allow mass atrocities to take place under its watch.
A year ago today, the Ethiopian government declared an all-encompassing siege on Tigray. Banking services and communication services alike were shut down, and Tigray was separated from the rest of the world. In these times where information about the outside world has become almost impossible to access, business centered on providing, distributing news and social media contents to keep Tigrayans in touch with the rest of the world are thriving. Our reporter Sarah Khalali spoke to some video store owners in Ma'ala that since the siege have started to focus their business on giving Tigrayans access to information.
For a year now, Tigray has been under a complete communications blackout. This has meant many things. For one, this means Tigrayans have no means of reaching their family members either living inside Tigray or abroad. For another, the communications blackout has meant that Tigrayans have little to no access to information about the world. This is Ma'bel. Ma'bel was an accounting student prior to the start of the war on Tigray. After being forced to discontinue his studies, he decided to open a video store in Maqala that sells news reports and political commentaries relevant to Tigray on the cheap.
I used to live in Inticha before the war. I was an accounting student at the college in my hometown. When the war began, Eritrean soldiers came and we were forced to leave our homes to come here to Maqala. After the siege started, everyone was out of work. There was no network. Power outages were frequent. Banks closed. And our family had no sources of income. So we decided to open this entertainment center.
Every morning, Ma'abil and his friends play some of the news they've been able to access on loudspeakers, so that even those that can't afford to take the news with them can hear the content. He says the turnout is extremely high, and it shows just how high the demand is for information in Tigray.
There is high demand for news. This is why we decided to open our business. When we play news on our speakers, young and old people alike gather outside our shop. People here are suffering from power outage and the communication blackout, so they are eager to hear the news we play.
Ma'abil added getting timely news is very difficult and that the frequent power outage has drastically affected his work.
When there is a power outage, we have a hard time getting our jobs done. You could say there is basically nothing for us to do. We can't get the videos we need nor distribute them because everything works on electric power. We also have a very difficult time getting timely news. But because there is demand from our people, we go to a lot of trouble to get the information that is needed.
Nathnael here provides Ma'abil with the news he needs to keep running his entertainment center. Nathnael says he has a lot of difficulty accessing news with the most demand and providing his service to businesses like Ma'abil's because internet access is virtually non-existent in Tigray.
There are people who download the news from the internet to give it to me. They have a very difficult time getting internet access. They go to different places and ask before they are able to finally get the news we need. The video I buy are really expensive. I can only make a profit when I distribute it to different places. I spend the money on living expenses. We are having a difficult time here, so I take the money home to my family. I go around distributing the news on my bicycle. I had bought one before the war. It sometimes breaks, so I have to repair it. I have never used public transportation. It's too expensive.
In the 21st century, where telecommunication services have become inseparable from our daily lives, Tigrayans have been denied this basic right for a year now, with the Ethiopian government maintaining the communications blackout in Tigray, keeping Tigray shut off from the rest of the world.
The communications blackout in Tigray has devastated separated families who have not had the opportunity to speak with their family members. Our reporter Winta Kidana visited an IDP camp in Mala where she met with Mulu Burhan, a mother of two, who was separated with her husband due to the conflict in 2020. Before the start of the siege, Mulu Burhan says her and her children used to communicate with her husband, but for a year now she has not been able to speak with her husband, a situation that has devastated her children.
Mulburhan Brahana is a mother of two. She and her children left their homes in Ba'khar in western Tigray in January of 2021. When she says attacks started to intensify against civilian Tigrayans by Amhara forces in the Fano. But she says her husband had been forced to leave their home much earlier when the Fano started to raid the homes of Tigrayans and arbitrarily beat and abuse them.
They would just attack people because they were Tigrayans, with no other reason. They came to our house and accused my husband of being a militia and would ask him to hand over his weapon. He told them that he didn't have a gun and that he's never been a militia, but they took him outside and beat him anyways. The next day, I sold everything I had so he could go to Sudan.
Mulburhan says her and her children had stayed behind because the forces had initially said that they wouldn't attack women and children. She said this later changed and that her and her children had to come to Maqala to save their lives, forcing her and her husband apart even further.
At first, they said that they wouldn't hurt women and children, but that was far from the truth. We realized soon after that we had to leave.
Mulburhan tells us that although her and her husband had physically separated, her and her children had managed to stay in touch with him over the phone until the start of the Ethiopia's siege on Tigray exactly 1 year ago today. That has practically severed Tigray from the world, making it impossible for her and her children to reach out to her husband.
We all miss him, especially my youngest son. He always asks about his father. Whenever he hears a knock on the door, he asks if his father is on the other side. That just breaks my heart.
Mulburhan says the siege must end soon so that her and others in her same position could reunite with their families.
The siege has to end. Telecommunication, electricity, and banking services have to be restored. We want to be able to speak to our family members and have access to our savings so we could help our family members. Everyone here in Maqala is suffering.
Tigray has been completely severed from the rest of the world for exactly a year now, with no telecommunication services, no electricity and routes for commercial goods or aid to enter the state. The question now is if the world will allow the siege to go on and the people of Tigray to remain disconnected.
Well, that's it for me today. Thank you for watching.